Welcome, everybody. This is our weekly Green Dialogue, and we try and have a special presentation once a month or so where we have a guest and a conversation about a specific item. But normally the conversation is about all things green, if you will. So tune into this link next week if you like. We have an ongoing conversation about issues ranging from pond restoration to transportation to zoning and planning, and there's just a lot of shared information that occurs in this juicy hour of conversation. So today is one of the more focused conversations, and I'm just gonna thank you all for joining us, because this is an issue that we are focused on in the township. We put a lot of resources into for many years, actually. And we have a resident with us who's going to be sort of a guinea pig, if you will, where he sort of shares his situation, and we're gonna discuss some things that our naturalists might recommend, and then open it up to a conversation with you if you have some questions or ideas that you'd like to share. So without further ado, I would like to just invite Kendra. Would you like to say a couple words before we or Emma, before we get started with Chuck's presentation? And I will just ask you to mute yourself if you're not speaking. But Kendra or Emma?
Well, I'll just say hi, everyone, really quick. I'm the Land Stewardship Coordinator with the township. So I just, I'm excited about this. I'm really glad that Chuck, that you reached out to us, and we will have a little short video after just talking about what wetland buffers are and vegetation buffers. So if you're a little lost on what those are, we will go over some of that. So
you want to start with that, Emma? Is that the plan? Or
yeah, I can. If that sounds like it would be helpful, I can share my screen, unless we already are shared to you right now.
No, you should be able to, but before you start that, Kendra, would you like to say anything else?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate everyone being here and Emma and Leroy's efforts on working on educating the community about wetlands. We have Bruce is part of our team here, and I see Paige is here, and so we have a year-long campaign as part of a Environmental Commission initiative, Land Preservation Advisory Board, Parks Commission. We're trying to get together and bridge gaps between a bunch of commissions and departments in the township, because we all are involved in working with the wetlands. As Emma calls it, they're kind of like the heart of our community. So we really appreciate everyone being involved, and we want to get people just bringing the things forward, and having people get connected and care, and make some changes that will be beneficial for their properties and for the greater environment. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Emma, do you want to try and share that video?
Yeah, and I just put in the chat, I'm almost 100% sure it's the most recent copy, but it is the draft of the Wetland Restoration and Education Program drafted by the Environmental Commission. So it's kind of an overview of what the program is. So if you'd like to check it out, go for it. Okay, now I will share my screen. So this is based out of Florida, this video, but it's, I just think this guy does a really good job explaining what our wetland buffers are. Well, not even just wetlands, just our buffer zones. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if I did the audio correctly. It didn't ask me a question.
Try it and see how it works.
Okay. Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
No, we can't. Why don't you stop sharing, and then there's a little button at the bottom that says share original sound. You should see that before you start sharing.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I missed it. You were
okay, not a problem.
There we go. This is why I work outside in nature.
We're in southern Pinellas County, and this is along the Bear Creek Channel. We have a wetland buffer area that's been planted by Pinellas County to help the water quality in this area. We're looking at some of the sand cordgrass, which helps trap some of the pollutants and the trash and debris before it gets into the creek. Wetland buffers are generally upland of the actual interior of the wetland. My name is Russell Martin, and I'm a lead compliance environmental scientist with the Southwest Florida Water Management District. A lot of the properties of the wetland buffer are to provide habitat for animals. They also serve as sort of a transitional area between the upland urban areas and the more natural wetland areas. Buffer areas can be anywhere that there would be water. So that could be a stormwater pond, a natural lake or surface water, a channelized creek like here at Bear Creek, or just even a wetland, forested wetland area. Well, folks that live next to these wetlands have questions such as what type of plants they can remove, what type of plants are good, and why are they required to be here. One of the things that we generally will tell people is that buffers are there to protect that habitat, but we also hope that with working with the district environmental scientists, that we can come up with a plan to structure it so that it is an aesthetically pleasing part of the landscape, but it would also provide the pollution control that it was intended to. It makes me proud to work for the Water Management District to see that these areas have become more of a functioning habitat and that the water quality is being improved by the placement of the buffers and the wetland vegetation.
All right, so like I said, it was just a really quick overview, but I really enjoy, and I think it's really important that talking about the upland areas too around these places. And so that's kind of all the things we're trying to touch on is plants that can go in, you know, the really wet areas, the upland areas, and how we can make it aesthetically pleasing. And that's kind of why you're here, Chuck, and we're going to hear your story about that. So
thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Chuck unless anyone else wants to say a word before he gets started. But Chuck has offered to sort of be a demonstration. So I really appreciate your putting yourself out there, Chuck and Renee. So we're looking at a lot of creative different ideas, but why don't you spend a few minutes just sharing your situation and I'll stop talking.
All right. Thank you, Leroy. And Renee, by the way, is appointment with sister emergency came up, and she's hoping to join us before the call is done. So let me pull up the file, share. All right, so as you can see my application, and they find the right application because it looks like it's not perfect. Oh, no. I have too many windows open.
Your audio is a little choppier. If you could speak up just a little bit, that would be helpful.
Will do. Thank you, Leroy. Is this better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, let me find it again. Here we go. All right, so that's it. And share button. Share screen. And specific one. Why does it keep on going like this? All right. Green dialog. There we go. Larger. And I'm going to zoom in. There we go. All right. Everyone's got a good view here now, I hope. And I'm going to minimize my window of people who are on the call. Okay. So how does that look? Everybody good?
We don't see, we still see your like your browser window. When you're going to share your screen, do you have multiple screens?
Yes, I'm trying to shut down some of them so that we don't have a problem.
Okay, yeah. So like when you go to share screen, I've read a lot of Zoom assistants at MSU. So when you go to share screen, you're going to see a bunch of different options. In the first two are, it's going to be called screen 1 and screen 2. And so that will share like everything that's on your screen. So like say that you had like that PDF showing, I know you shared some materials via email. If you just share that screen versus the material, there you go. That's exactly what we want.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do. I haven't done a Zoom call in a few years now, so thank you. Okay, so this is here's just a picture of the newly constructed house that I have. It was constructed, it took a year to build. Jerry Fido Homes did the building, and it's right on Hewlett Road. And I'll show you a map on this next screen or two. But it was great to see the video ahead of time with the buffer, because what you'll see in my backyard is I back right up to a buffer, a wetland buffer. And actually, and the buffer as defined by the, I think by the, well, I'm not certain who defined it, but you've got a wetland area, and then there's a 20-foot buffer from where that delineation is, the wetland, that you know, you don't do anything in that 20-foot buffer. And you got to make sure you keep the grade the way it is, or if you disrupt it, you put it back the way it was. You know, if during construction, for example, that area gets you know, disrupted. So, and we found too is when the delineation was done, that wetland buffer actually comes about 7 feet into the northeast corner of my backyard. So that's an area where I really should not be, you know, mowing. We should just let the natural vegetation grow. A couple other factors, since we are on Hewlett Road, you'll see that we get rainwater off the road. The road has been raised over the years, Hewlett Road, so it's higher than what my lot had been. It's higher than the sidewalk, and there's no curb there. So any rainwater, when you have big storms, that water just comes off that road onto my front yard, essentially. And then, since there's a house here and I'm near a wetland, I have a sump pump. I actually have two. One is a backup, 2 separate cracks. And right now, there is a continuous, it doesn't stop, it's a continuous flow of water out of that pipe into the area near the wetland. And one of the things that we want to do, some of the objectives, when Leroy had, you know, sent out a request for you know, projects, you know, whether they were schools or private homeowners, something that would help achieve some of the objectives of save the buffers and stuff. My house seemed to come, you know, my project seemed to fit right in with that. What we want to do is we want to incorporate native plants and wetland stewardship into the site, and also make sure that the water that's being handled is handled best way. The water, the runoff off the road, and the runoff from, you know, the direct pumping out from the sump. So that's our situation. And here, I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. This is my parcel. This is the parcel. This is, consider this like an aerial view. And we're about 148 feet in the back, 170 or so front to back. And we've got about 125 foot of frontage on Hewlett Road. So Hewlett Road is at the bottom here. We are kind of kitty corner from the football field, just north of Loon Lane. We're the second house north of Loon Lane. So it's kind of fun. We like the location because my wife taught at the high school for more than 20 years since it's been open. And my daughter now teaches there at the high school, and our kids are at Bennett Woods. Our grandkids are at Bennett Woods. My kids have grown up. So we really like the location. And on this parcel, we have 3 structures. We have a house that was completed right here, and the structures are outlined in black. We've got a pole barn, a 30-foot by 40-foot pole barn. And then there is a detached garage that used to be far from the road, but now it's about 20 feet away because the road's been widened over time. And we have a driveway. So this kind of gives you a little idea. Now the red lines here are how we have currently addressed water issues. So what we have is what's called a swale, which essentially you got the runoff from the road, from Hewlett Road, and it comes onto the front yard here. The driveway goes up, so we don't have water going up our driveway, but everywhere else we had to build up a lot of it. So this red line on the left-hand side directs water to the back of the parcel. And then there's another very low spot right here between our driveway and the existing garage, one that was there. attached. And so we ended up, we had a swale there as well, running from front to back to direct the water, but it was really deep. And it was essentially like having a ditch, except, right down the middle of our yard. So working with an excavation company, a couple of people recommended putting in, it's a 6-inch pipe. And then we're able to fill dirt up over that. And so the water goes from the road in this area on the southeast side of the, well, it's actually the southwest side of my parcel. Any road, any water from this side of the left and right of this driveway goes into this low spot and then gets run through the pipe to the wetland below or in the back. So, and then this yellow line, here's the important one that was talked about by Emma as well, and it's called the buffer. So my house is here. We've got a 40-foot buffer where you can't do anything within that area of the wetland. And you'll see when you get up here, it's maybe 10 feet away from the back of my house. And then the 20-foot barrier, the 20-foot buffer zone that you have to leave as is without changing that landscape starts towards the back of my parcel. So it's 20 foot back. And then the wetland itself is pretty much where this dark blue line is. That's the delineated from Elise Tripp, I think was her name. She's the wetland consultant for the township. So that's the kind of the lay of the land. I've got some pictures. And Leroy, if I am going slower than you want, I'm going to pick up the pace now, but just let me know.
Sounds good. I think a couple more minutes and then we'll get into the, let Emma speak and then we'll have a little Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. All right, here's a front view of the entire parcel. You got the house, the existing garage. You can see that's much closer to the Hewlett Road. And this is the area where I mentioned that we've got a low spot and there's now a pipe there that directs the water to the back. And then the swale is here and we'll see a couple more pictures. This shows how the water flow that we are currently dealing with, where it comes right off the road over the sidewalk. And then it would gather here a bit and then it's directed to the back. That's how we're dealing with road runoff on that side of the parcel. And then on the other side, whoops, let me go back to my, sorry. And this is from my front porch. It just shows you where the water's coming, forward and then off to the right. The water should never hit our house. That would be a real problem. And this is just a close-up or another view of where that swale is. That's essentially like a direct channel of water from the front and from the road straight back to the wetland. And this is the 6-inch drain pipe that we put in. So water comes down my driveway here on the right side, and there's a low spot here. Then it goes back up a little bit into the garage. So most of the water is then directed here, and this is the lowest spot. And so any of the runoff from the road is now directed back to the wetland buffer. And that just gives you a view here of our pole barn. This is the area between the pole barn, the garage, and the house. And we're looking for creative landscape ideas here as well. We do have some pressed stone that will stay there so that you can get in and out of the pole barn. But any landscaping in addition to that, and it may not be as critical here. The back is certainly, I think, among the most critical. And then what we do with the swale, what should be planted in the swale, or should it be stone? We're looking for those type of ideas. We also put in a catch basin. So it takes anything that comes off the crushed stone that doesn't just sink into the ground. And we put the crushed stone there so there wasn't another solid surface. They've got some things like permeable concrete, which I didn't even look into. I know it's there, but we figured the crushed stone would be another good solution. So we're not just creating a ton of more runoff. That will allow some of the water to soak in, and that's the reason for the crushed gravel or stone versus paving that parking area for the pole barn. And then just a view from the backyard so you can get an idea of the layout of the land. This is the back. This essentially here is the buffer area, and the wetland starts within 20 feet of this. And in some cases, it's even closer. And then the houses that are here that are within this little red area are on Loon Lane. So we're kind of kitty corner to this one home here. Our backyard back up corner of their yard. And then here's just another view, which gives you a little idea. Now we're getting into where we have some details. You've got the buffer zone, and then the wetland starts right beyond that. And there's some pink flags. Actually, I think I see one right here, which is actually the delineation for where the wetland starts. I think that's one.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. This is
All right.
pictures worth 1,000 words.
Yep. And so Leroy, I mean, just we've got the sump output there. So here's the water. We've got the 6-inch drain pipe. We've got the sump pipe right below it. And it's putting water right here. And I had to dig a trench. Otherwise, the water just stayed here too much into the buffer zone. I didn't go into the wetland yet, but it is a trench or something built into that buffer zone of the wetland. So Leroy, I can go through some more slides, or I can go towards the end where you put a few, or just direct it from here.
I think we're good for now. Why don't we come back to this as needed? But
Right.
let's let Emma take it from here. Thank you, Chuck, for that, assembling those slides and for sharing again this interesting and unique project.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Emma, I'm gonna just let you take it from here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, that was great. I was like shaking my head vigorously the whole time you were talking about all the reasons that you want to pursue this, and it's basically a dream for me to hear residents talking about this, and I would love everyone to so I do have a question quick before I move on. How it sounds like you had a really good process with your delineation. Elise works for township, she's great. So when you were going through all this, was it pretty, was the communication really clear about your buffer? I mean, you sound like you know everything, but did you have to really dig to look at anything, or did you feel like you were communicated too well about where your buffer was? And
Well, it was communicated pretty well to me.
good.
And what I had actually done is, Elise was just going to have these points, and I was able to get the actual delineation points from her, the GPS points, and I gave those to my survey guy, and so he was able to overlay them onto the plot land, the lot plan, I guess it is, so that the builder would know where he needs to be, where the house needs to be. He had to be at least 40 feet back from that delineation line. And then we had to make sure we didn't encroach into that 20-foot area as well. I mean, you didn't notice, but the back of my house, I've got a deck. I was going to have steps on that deck going down into the backyard. Those steps would have been into that 20-foot buffer, or the 40-foot, I'm sorry, area. And so we just opted not to have any steps instead of trying to find another way. So yes, we definitely had to understand, we had to know what the requirements were. We wanted to follow them. And now we want to make sure we plant the right plants back there. And we're looking for creative stuff. We're not into a lot of grass if we don't have to have grass. I like the ornamental grasses and stuff, but I don't need turf grass.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, and that's a good idea, having that the GPS points overlaid in the survey. That's great. Well, I feel like this is a great example for how residents should be going through this process. It's really good to see the process working, and that's what all these things are there for, is to protect these spaces. So this is a great scenario, and I do have quite a few resources with me today. Like Leroy and Kendra said, Kendra lives on a wetland herself. One of our really nice wetlands, Davis Foster, on one of our most loved preserves. So that really became her passion project. And so we really want to make it easier for residents like you to kind of move forward and come up with these plans. So we do want to come up with plans to be able to, you know, for us to hand your landscape, I can't remember his name from the email, but yeah, so, you know, to be able to hand over plans and say, you know, these plants can go here in this arrangement and all this stuff. So we're working on all of that. It's still a work in progress, but we do have quite a bit together, and I'm going to upload a few things into the chat. Is it okay if I share my screen, Leroy? Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to upload this plant list. Now, it's not all wetland species. The ones that are highlighted in blue, can everyone see this right? Good.
Yes.
Okay. The ones that are highlighted in blue are going to be some type of wetlands indicator species, whether, you know, they might be, they're going to be labeled like OBL, and I have a table to go with that too, which means they're obligate. So they are going to always be found in a wetland. They're probably going to really be able to tolerate wet a lot better. And then there's varying levels. So kind of like we saw in that video and like we're seeing in your yard is there are varying levels to our buffers. So some of the area is going to be really wet, like where you had to dig a trench, and some of it's going to be more upland. And so this list comprises varying plants of that degree. So so I can, you know, give that out today for you to look over. And then if you aren't into, like, if you don't want to really deal with turf too much, so this is Michigan Wildflower Farm. This is something I'm trying to do in my yard, is get rid of my grass to mow, as well as putting in gardens. So yeah, you can put in all the gardens you want, but you still have grass at the end of the day. And with all that runoff from the road, the really great thing about a lot of these plants, in that you maybe are looking to not do turf, is that those plants can really withstand salt a lot better. Native plants are so resistant or so resilient to a lot of environmental factors. Obviously, some of them are going to need more pristine conditions, but we do actually have a great example here too of, I can't get to it on my.
I will share the results of this conversation and the chat window links with anyone after the meeting. If you don't get it, just send me an email. I'll post my email here as well as Emma's.
Yeah, and I'll put everything in when I'm done. So if you look at these, so here's this table. So when you're looking at the plant list, this will all be together in a guide, but the guide is very expansive. So we're kind of just breaking it up to get some information out for this today. But this is the table that kind of tells you about the different wetland plants. It goes all the way to upland, which are going to be more drought tolerant plants that don't mind it being too dry. But here's some pictures just to kind of give an example from residents in our community who do incredible native gardening. This is Jim Hewitt too. He also does a ton of volunteering for the township. But as you can see from this picture, this is the back of his property. And this is a wetland buffer that is just immaculate. It's really beautiful. This is going to be more of what you think of as like a wild natural buffer. Like it says in the ordinance, you need to maintain this natural buffer 20 to 40 feet. So that's kind of an example of what this is, that part is really going to look more like. Now, what you invest is what you invest. So Jim he's a botanist. He probably goes through this buffer and hand picks out invasive species, and he's definitely put a lot into this buffer. He's got jewelweed. Yeah, there's some jewelweed down here. There's some kind of asters, some Joe Pye weed, goldenrods, and all just a whole variety. So he didn't just let this grow in like this. He probably let some things come in naturally, but I'm sure he had to do some planting here to get some of these really nice species. But it's just a beautiful, here's a far away picture of it. Just a beautiful example of what a wetland buffer can look like. And this is going to soak up so much water. I liked how that in that video, it talks about how native grasses along a buffer can catch trash before it gets in. So that's a great example of that. And that might be more like what you would want to go for that area right behind your house.
Mhm.
And then this is from Betty Segal's house. She, I can always see her garden from the road. She's got an absolutely gorgeous layout. And so she is a great person when I'm looking at your front yard and then your runoff on the side,
Mhm.
that swale area. So that's an area where I feel like, you know, you're going to really want to use species that can tolerate, you know, more of that runoff. And the great thing about wetlands is they do filter our water. So that's good that that road water is going to go into the wetland. But we still want to be able to filter that water before it gets totally in there. And it'll increase the functionality of the wetland too, which is great. So Betty would be a great person to talk to about. So this is her ditch garden. And so this is more, it's more of a layout, more like, looks like a more traditional garden in the way that things are placed. It's not quite as wild looking. And so, yeah, these are all native plants through here. Just an example of kind of the difference between a more wild buffer and something that's more intentionally planted, which I think you could combine both of those in your situation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Michigan Wildflower Farm, they do have a fescue mix that's a no-mow, which I'm trying in my front yard this year. So I hope it works out. But fescues are nice because they don't get over, their max height is like 8 inches, but they are rolling. Like they're very soft, nice grass. And so they won't ever stand up. It'll just kind of lay. And that's why you really don't have to mow it. So they do have a fescue mix. They've got a bunch of different cover crop mixes too, just different things to look at. But if you do like grasses too, ornamental grasses, that plant list does have a bunch of native species listed for grasses. And they are, some of them have really cool seed pods and they have almost like look like flowers, and they provide really great fall color and winter color. And so, you know, really just kind of being mindful to your yard and what plants are going to really work. And then of course, too, trying to stay really local if you can. Our plant list is based off of our native plant sale at Harris Nature Center this May, but there are a lot of other plant sales too, and there's a lot of other resources that we can pass on. So that's kind of all I have right now, unless someone has a question, or if you have a question, Chuck.
Well, I'll let Chuck speak, but we also have a couple other experts here that I would invite Carla or Paige to tune in as well, or to pipe up, and others that I may not know are experts. But we'll just pause. Chuck, what have you got?
No, Lyra, let's hear from them, because Emma and I can talk offline, you know, so on details. So yeah,
Yes, we can chat anytime.
Yeah, thank you, Emma.
Okay, well, Paige or Carla, would you like to add anything, or anyone else to the conversation at this point?
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. Hi, Chuck. My name is Paige Felice. I'm a natural resources educator with Michigan State University Extension.
Great.
So, yeah, so I'm based in Mason, so Ingham County, but I cover the state. And we have quite a few resources on just landscaping practices to protect water quality. And we've have a whole smart gardening series about it that's actually on the Meridian Township Wetland website. So I'm sure someone can throw that in the chat quick, but I would just echo, I think, everything that Emma was saying. I think it's really spot on. I really liked that you thought about your driveway and thinking about using crushed gravel as opposed to, you know, having pavement. I mean, I think that's like exactly what you want. And thinking about, especially the salt runoff from your road. I know like it's beautiful to have gardens, but just being mindful of that sort of thing. Because that can definitely be an issue people run into. But I think the the township's new fancy native plant guide will be really, really perfect and ideal for the situation. But yeah, I'll just say I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to be really great, and wonderful as an example of what someone can do, especially and not start with a clean slate. You know, sometimes it's difficult for people to think about their landscapes after they've done them, but a whole nother thing to kind of start fresh.
Yeah, we figured this is the time to do it. And, you know, I've got one idea for a berm at the high point of my yard, but where that swale is and what we should plant there. And yeah, I didn't know if it's plants or stone. It sounds like we could put some nice plants into that swale that will still allow the water to go through and to run to the back.
Definitely, definitely.
Nice
Yeah. And I mean, think about too, like if you were like a traditional rain garden, for example, which is a bowl shape where water is flowing into it, sometimes has a berm or is able to flow out. But, you know, depending on how it's planted, you know, it won't hold water for more than 24 to 48 hours. So obviously you probably have a pretty high water table, but, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially with the plants that you choose, where it could drain really quickly and have great infiltration. So, yeah,
Okay.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, well, you don't mind if I tap you at some point?
Yeah, nope, that's not a problem. And MSU Extension has a variety of, excuse me, horticulture educators. So I will admit I'm not a plant person. I'm more of the aquatic resources type
Okay.
field. But we do have a horticulturist in our office who knows plants. So absolutely feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with her and some of our other native plant resources at MSU and Extension.
Yeah, well, great. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a quick observation, if I might, in terms of using the project as an example. And I agree that all the thought that's gone into this is a really great example for other people who might be facing similar situations. And maybe a nuance in describing it. You know, the ordinance specifically prohibits draining or causing to be drained any water into or from a protected wetland. And, you know, if you thought about this project one way, you would say, well, no, you're draining your water into a wetland and that's prohibited. If you think about it another way, the water that you're dealing with has probably always been going into that wetland.
Right.
And at the moment, now it's got to go around a house to get into that wetland.
Exactly.
So it's really a reorientation of some pre-existing drainage. And I think it might be useful to find a nice way, a good way to explain that so that we're not seeming to be encouraging people to direct water into a wetland that wouldn't naturally be going there. And that's really tricky because we never know the exact history of that plot and what the topography looked like before the road was built, before the old house was built and other things. But the notion that this is not a new direction of water into a wetland, but a redirection to accommodate the fact there's a house there now, that could help avoid confusion.
Yes, and I think the township has been very receptive to that. You know, we had them inspect where our sump pump output was going, for example, and the swale. You know, and I worked with Giannis Israni, I think. But he and I, we worked on this project for a few years before it started on how we do some of these things. So yeah, they're good with that. They were definitely good with redirecting the water, as you said, versus, you know, we're not, I mean, it was always going there, but we just have to go around the house. So yes, he was very good about that. Thank you.
One of the things Chuck mentioned was a desire to get sort of a plan that he could share with his landscaping company. So some of the designs and the sample guides that Emma has been working on, I think will be helpful for that. But I guess just a question to throw out there is, when do you hire a landscape architect? And when do you just throw seeds out in the back 40? And so I don't have the answer. I know it can be costly, but I know some landscapers do it design and build, but any thoughts on that issue? Emma or Paige or Chuck or others?
I have one thought. Well, and you also kind of made me think of something else I wanted to make sure to bring up. I think it's difficult. It really actually too, it depends on so many factors, I think. And, you know, what's your budget? What, you know, plugs, I think plugs are great. They have a higher chance of surviving. You know, you can kind of take better care of them individually. They can cost more. But again, you're kind of investing in the time you'd be spending losing some seed. If you have a really big area, or, you know, say you want to just throw some seed down initially on that buffer and see what comes up, you could do a mix. You know, you could do some plugs if you want and some seed. There's people also in the township. There's a lot of connections we're trying to make too, in order to, you know, something is like exchanging seeds with people, seeing what works in other people's yards. That's why I think people like Betty are going to be a really great resource for residents like you. But yeah, I think with the whole seeds versus, you know, plugs or whatnot, I think the buffers themselves are good places for the seeds, because it can look a little more wild. I mean, it can look as wild as you want anywhere, really, but I think that's generally where people would want to see that more of that fullness. But I do want to mention really quick about invasive species, is that that's going to be an ongoing maintenance thing for residents who are trying to maintain a buffer. So that's another thing that, Chuck, if you want me to do a site visit ever or come out and look at anything, I can help you with that at a different time.
Yes, because I have no clue. I'm assuming what's there is naturally there. And I know I've talked about some plants I was thinking about doing, and we found out they're invasive, so we crossed them off the list. But yes, Emma, we'll definitely spend some time, if you're willing, to take a look at what's there, and hopefully it's all good, you know, regular stuff you would expect to see.
Right.
And then, you know, when we add the seed, as far as the budget, you know, we want to do it right.
Yeah.
And we want it, you know, mapped out ahead of time, even if it's, you know, a hand drawn, or we just take the lot plan and blow it bigger and just say, all right, here's a berm here. This area here is where we're going to do, you know, these type of plants, because it's directing the water. It's a swale. You know, and I could even do that while I'm getting the input from everybody, and give that to David. David Bruce was the one who was, you know, scheduled for the landscape, and he'll do essentially anything we want. You know, he's an MSU educated. He's been in East Lansing for 30 something years doing this work. But, you know,
he's pretty open.
he's open. He's got ideas. But then when we started, we even kicked around certain things. We'll talk separately. We don't take
right. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll contact you. We'll set up a time.
Right. Yeah, let's definitely do that. And anybody who's listening, I'm always happy to come out and do an invasive consultation or native plant consultation. I don't know all native plants, but I know every invasive. So yeah, I think it is hard. Do you do it all at once? Or, you know, if you can't do it all at once, like in my yard, I have to do everything in pieces because it is a lot of work. It's time, it's money. So, you know, looking at obviously the wetland is a priority, but I think personally, a really inexpensive way to grow native plants is to honestly just see what comes up in the seed bank. And because that's buffering that wetland, there's a good chance there might be some native seeds in there that could come up. Now, I do want that wetland buffer to be planted and restored quickly, but, you know, in the meantime, you could really plan out that side swale area that is going to be a little bit more probably, you know, heavily managed or manicured in a way. And then still be maintaining your buffer, just removing invasive species, seeing what comes up in its place, giving it a little time before you really heavily plant it. If, you know, you don't want to plant everything at once. If that's an option, you know, for sure. But it is kind of interesting to see what's going to come up if you leave it alone. Obviously it's really wet there for you right now, but the ground is just, you know, things will grow when it gets a little less mucky and icy and weird. So yeah.
Kendra?
Thank you. Chuck, thank you so much for bringing this project forward and caring so much and learning and, you know, wanting to do the right things. You know, it's really great that you're putting all this time and effort forward in that sort of way. So really grateful to hear that. And living on wetlands, you know, you can do it lots of different ways. And Emma's right about the invasive species. We removed a whole bunch of them, but also just allowing what grows to grow and come up too. You know, knowing what the invasive species are and removing them. But it's amazing if you just let go what awesome plants come. It's just fantastic. One thing I want to say about the 20-foot natural vegetation buffer is that you can't dig, the ordinance says you can't dig in that without a soil erosion permit. I know you did just a little bit to get that, you know, that water diverted away, and you probably didn't know, but you know, you're a great example of a person who's trying to do all the right things, you know, and just didn't know that one little thing right there. So I just wanted to let you know that you need a soil erosion permit. You have to put it in the silt fencing and that kind of thing. So before you do any more of that, I would kind of advise that you look at that end of things. But in general, you're really doing, you're trying to do the correct thing. So that's really great. Emma's native plant guide is fantastic. We have the Harris Nature Center plant sale that's, you know, pre-orders are happening here in April. And then with that plant sale being on May 7th, there was Vern Stevens did a native plant class last week. That's going to run on home TV here starting in a week or so. We're going to run on home TV for 2 weeks. Wild Ones, which I don't think we have any of our Wild Ones folks with us today. They're going to have a plant on wetland sedges on, is that April 27th, maybe? Is it April 27th? So, you know, there's a lot there, and they're also having a native plant sale at the market on, I think, the 14th of May. So, you know, you've got some opportunities here. I know you're working with landscape, you know, architect, but you're also has some opportunities, you know, to support the Harris Nature Center by buying plugs there, you know, and Wild Ones, different kinds of folks. And we have this, you know, we have a year-long wetland education, you know, program that we're going to be doing. So, you know, I'm really grateful that you want to be part of it and learn more. So those are a few resources.
Yeah, I've got the next couple wetland walks on my calendar. I missed the first one or two because I was out of the state for a couple months. But yeah, and that's part of why I want to get this plan, at least what the plants are, because I know on my calendar today is to print the order form for the Harris Nature Center native plants now. I don't know the order
Awesome.
yet.
Let's open it up. We've got about 10 more minutes. We want to make best use of your time. What other questions or comments do people have here in the audience? Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself. I do want to mention that Carla had shared a couple of resources from the Tower Neighborhood Project, some sample designs for various types of landscapes, dry, wet, depending on your goals, pollinator mix. So take a look at those, that PDF, if you get a chance. Anybody else have comments?
I just put the Wild Ones website in the chat if you want to look at they have plant sales listed and their webinar time listed too for anyone who's interested.
Also want to suggest that we do this on a weekly basis with Emma and Paige's podcast.
I'm in.
Really? Okay. Sign me up for an invasive species checkup too.
Oh yes, I do have a invasive species. I kind of forgot because it's a rain date, but I have an invasive species training this Saturday from 1 to 3, and I can put the info in the chat if anybody does need a brush up.
Awesome. Anybody else have any comments or just general questions? There's nothing off limits here. If you have something. But I just got an email from Bob Welch. He was hoping to be here today, but he had a doctor's appointment. He started the landscape architecture program at LCC and now consults statewide, probably in the entire Midwest, working with landscaping professionals. So we're going to share this link and he'll probably have some additional thoughts. But we're hoping that this is not, conversation is not going to be over, obviously, at 10 o'clock. It'll be an ongoing thing. So thank you, Emma and Paige, for offering your expertise. Bruce had also offered, invited a wetland specialist from DEQ or Eagle to talk about some grants that are out there for wetlands. I'm not sure if that person is here, but Mike,
Yeah.
is that you?
Yep, that's me.
Do you want to say anything?
Not to necessarily talk about grants. So I'm the voluntary wetland restoration coordinator for Eagle statewide. So I work with groups like Fish and Wildlife Service and DNR to permit their wetland restoration projects. And Bruce invited me to listen in today. And I just wanted to say this was a great discussion. You know, I liked everything I heard. We really need more of this out there in the world, these, you know, local groups getting out this type of information. Super great. You know, the group I work for, the Water Resources Division, you know, we're super supportive of projects like buffers and rain gardens and things because they really are great for water quality, especially in these urbanized areas where you get a ton of, you know, nutrient input from people fertilizing their yards and things. So everything we can do to help, you know, filter that is good. And I think, Chuck, you know, your swale there seems like a really good candidate for like a rain garden type situation where, you know, you're not just filtering the water with the plant material, but, you know, you also put down some porous material like some sand and gravel. And so you're increasing infiltration into the groundwater before it even gets to the wetland.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you definitely have some really good options there. Yeah, that's about all I wanted to say. I guess this is, you know, it's been really good. I'm glad you guys are doing this.
One of the things that I've read about was gravel gardening, or gravel gardens. And I read about this recently where you essentially have 4 or 5 inches of a pretty fine type gravel. And then the plants, then you cut out, you know, an area, dig out an area of that, and you take the plants and even get all the dirt off the roots, place them into the gravel, water them well so that those root systems get into the soil below. And then it also keeps other weeds out while, and that seemed like something that people would do for a decorative area. I didn't know if that would work for a swale or not, but that's one of the things that I'll talk to Emma about. But do you have any thoughts on that though, Mike?
Yeah, you know, I think when Emma, I think it was Emma had up the Michigan Wildflower Farm seed mixes. I believe they've got like a rain garden seed mix designed specifically for those types of environments where it's more sand and gravel substrate than, you know, just organics. So yeah, I would recommend taking a look at that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll want to look at, you know, what is perennial versus annual flowers. For something like that, I'd like to not have to replant it here.
Yeah, I think they'd probably all be perennials in
Yeah,
there.
well, that's good.
Not everyone is going to have as much time and maybe resources as Chuck with this new property, but our goal is to sort of compact this message in a way that's deliverable and shareable with the masses. So if you have any feedback on how we could be more concise or what resources are most helpful to you, any of you, that would be helpful as our wetland education team moves forward.
Yeah, I wanted to say hi, Mike, and that's awesome. That work that you do sounds amazing. And thank you so much for being here. I'm glad that we just have so many good resources and people that we can, chat with. And you brought up the substrate, which I hadn't really, I don't really know much about that. I haven't thought about that, but that's something that in rain garden. So if you put it in with your planting, it's supposed to help kind of with the water, like how it soaks into the ground and how it's filtered. Is that?
Well, I think it's really more of it's weed control, for stuff that you don't want to be there. And if invasive species are an issue with spreading seeds and stuff, they don't have a chance to root because it's stone. There's no organic material in that stone. And then you have to train the plants so their root system grows through that stone into the soil below. Then anything else doesn't have a chance to start to grow. And so I think it's a good approach to preventative on invasive species, at least those that spread via seed, that blow through the air. If it's something that's rhizome, underground related, it may not help as much. But we'll talk more. We'll discuss that too, Emma, when we meet.
Yeah, and I did put a document in the chat that's something that Eagle put together. It's a little aged, but it's still good. And it does have a section on rain gardens in there, as well as, other kind of landscape type things you can do for water quality. And it does have specific like seed mixes in there. So yeah, I recommend checking that out.
Yep, I downloaded that. Thanks, Mike.
That's great. Thank you.
Again, I'll share some of these resources with those of you whose email I have. If you want to put your email in the chat window or send me an email, let me know. I'll send you the recording of this as well. Any other parting comments before we zoom out?
Inside the wall, you could build a cabinet that has an opening in the back of it, and slide it over top of it, but it has to be accessible and it cannot be hidden inside of it. So.
If not, did you have something, Bruce?
Okay.
No, I did not. I just wanted to poke my face in there before we signed off.
Great. Thanks again, Chuck and Renee, your partner,
All right, thank you, sir.
for being a guinea pig here. And if people have additional ideas they would like to share with you, do you mind receiving more emails, Chuck?
No, if you've got ideas, folks, I would appreciate them. I mean, Kendra's got some good insight there, and Emma, I plan to sit down face to face with Emma at some point here. But no, any ideas you have are great. We're going to try to collect those ideas and come up with a plan. Yes. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch you next week. We'll keep the conversation going. Kendra, go ahead.
One last thing, Chuck, would you be willing to continue to take pictures along the way of the project and pay attention to what's working and what's not working? We're looking for folks who want to be examples for our wetland education.
Yeah, we'll probably be monitoring it, and I tend to do that, through the build process, take pictures of the house as it's progressing, and probably we'll do the same thing with the landscape. And with the specific thought then is because Leroy was talking about how to incorporate this into an educational, something that we can show from start to finish and then learn from. So yes, my intent will be to do that.
Great,
It might be a good opportunity to make like a home TV presentation out of it, before and after kind of a thing, and follow it through.
That's a great idea.
If we think about it ahead of time, we can get some video footage, early on, and obviously we'll have photos because I will be taking photos, but it might be nice to have some video too. Yeah. It's a good idea, Bruce.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity to learn what works and what doesn't. And as we're putting these plans together, we're really trying to think about the realistic, what is realistic for people? What is their long-term maintenance going to look like? What's management going to look like? So, cost, all those things, we really want to make it easy for everyone. So yeah, that's great. And if we can all just learn from each other.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Emma, for spending the time, and Paige, Kendra, Bruce, Bill, our wetland education folks, and Mike for tuning in.
Exactly.
Well, we'll see you again soon at Paige and Emma's podcast next.
I
Next
think this
Wednesday
is
at
happening
9.
now. No.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
Nice to
thanks,
meet you, Chuck.
everyone.
All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.